Welcome back to Loving Literature. We're reading chapter 2 now of The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Before you start reading chapter 2 with me, I highly suggest that you watch a video about the Puritans, and I'm going to put that video on my news blog on your student page. So take a look at that. You need to know a little bit about the Puritan people, what they believed in, what they were like. It will really help you understand what we're about to read here in chapter 2. So if you haven't done that, pause this video and go take a look at the Puritans video on your student page. This chapter is titled The Marketplace. Again, chapter titles can often suggest the setting. So we're obviously in this colony, the colony of Boston that we discovered from chapter 1, but we are now in this area of town called the Marketplace. Well, what's a marketplace? It's where people buy and sell, right? People gather there to do their daily business. All right, remember to have your items handy, your highlighter, your pencil, your sticky notes. Whether if you can't write in the book, you need these ready, and have your dictionary or thesaurus handy. Make sure you have all of those things to use to help you study the chapter. All right, so let's begin. The grass plot before the jail in Prison Lane on a certain summer morning not less than 2 centuries ago was occupied by a pretty large number of the inhabitants of Boston, all with their eyes intently fastened on the iron-clamped oaken door, that's the door we just read about in chapter 1. Amongst any other population, or at a later period in the history of New England, the grim rigidity that petrified the bearded physiognomies of these good people would have augured some awful business in hand. It could have betokened nothing short of the anticipated execution of some noted culprit on whom the sentence of a legal tribunal had but confirmed the verdict of a public sentiment. But in that early severity of the Puritan character, an inference of this kind could not so indubitably be drawn. Okay, I just wanted to read down to here to show you the length of sentences here and help you to understand what's going on. So remember to read all the way through to punctuation. And then don't end your sentence until you see that end mark. So sentence number 1 goes all the way down to door right here. So we want to mark our subject and predicate again to make sure we're not confused. So what are we talking about, or who are we talking about? We're talking about a grass plot. Okay. Now we have to figure out where the predicate is. What is it saying about the grass plot? Well, as you know, Nathaniel Hawthorne likes to give a lot of descriptive information between the subject and the predicate. So we want to find out what's happening with this grass plot. The grass plot, here's description before the jail, here's description in Prison Lane, here's description on a certain summer morning, description not less than 2 centuries ago. Here's our predicate. Was occupied by. Was occupied. Okay, so the grass plot was occupied by a pretty large number of inhabitants of Boston. Okay, that's easy to understand. People who live in Boston were occupying the grass plot that was right before the jail. You know, it's a lot of words to say something simple, right? Now we're describing the people, the inhabitants, all with their eyes intently fastened on the iron-clamped oaken door. Everybody's staring at the door. Then it describes more about the people. Amongst any other population, or at a later period in the history of New England, okay, if it was any other group of people or any other time period, these people have the grim rigidity that petrified the bearded physiognomies. Oh, wow, physiognomies. Definitely a word you would have to look up. Okay. I will tell you what it means. It means their facial expressions that are suggesting what they are feeling. Okay, so their face, the way they look, their facial expressions are suggesting how they feel. They're suggesting their emotions. Of these good people, notice it's calling them good, would have augured some awful business in hand. Okay, awful business, that means something bad about to happen. So basically, this is just saying, at any other time in history or with any other group of people other than the ones that we're talking about, if you looked at their face to try to figure out what they were feeling or thinking, you would have expected that something awful was about to happen. Okay, that would be expected from the look on the face of people that were looking like these people. But then it says, again, it suggests that same thing, that something bad's going to happen, that they anticipate execution of some noted culprit, so somebody's going to, they look like they're expecting something bad to happen to whoever is behind that prison door. And then it says, but in that early severity of the Puritan character, an inference of this kind could not so indubitably be drawn. Indubitably, that's a word we had on Word of the Week. It's on one of our Word of the Week slides. It basically means undoubtedly, without a doubt. So, and there's the Puritan, the word Puritan, that I told you to watch the video about the Puritans so you know a little bit about these people. So it's saying that these people that have this look on their faces, you can't infer, you cannot guess that something bad or awful is going to happen, because these people have that kind of severity all the time. They kind of look this way all the time. And now it's going to give some suggestions of why they could possibly be looking that way. It might be that a sluggish bond servant or an undutiful child whom his parents had given over to the civil authority was to be corrected at the whipping post. This was a form of punishment, okay? So it's saying it might be that. Maybe that's why they look that way. It might be that an antinomian, it's defining what that is, a Quaker or other heterodox religionist, was to be scourged out of the town. Or an idle and vagrant Indian, this would be a Native American Indian, whom the white man's firewater had made riotous about the streets. Firewater is alcohol. Was to be driven with stripes into the shadow of the forest. Okay? Stripes here usually means they're whipping or beating the person so that it makes marks on their back, like stripes. And as they're beating them, they're driving them back into the forest, getting them out of the town. It might be, too, that a witch, like old Mistress Hibbins, the bitter-tempered widow of the magistrate. A magistrate is a judge. You might want to mark that down. A magistrate is like what we would have today, like a judge. Okay? Was to die upon the gallows. Die upon the gallows means to be hung. To hang, okay? To be hung. In either case, there was very much the same solemnity of demeanor is behavior, on the part of the spectators. as befitted a people amongst whom religion and law were almost identical. Okay, this is saying something about the character of these people. It's a people amongst whom religion and law were almost identical, and in whose character both, meaning both religion and law, were so thoroughly interfused that the mildest and severest acts of public discipline were alike made venerable and awful. Okay, so it's saying that not only that these people lived their religion to the point of their religion being like the law. The two were formed together. So the laws of the town were all connected to the religion of these people, and that they were so connected that no matter what they did, whether it was the mildest or severest act, whether they did something mild or did something severe, of public discipline, they were both, it was both considered to be venerable, which means like honored, but also awful. So there's a lot of contrast there, okay, opposing ideas. But again, this is why you need to watch that video about the Puritans, because it really helps you understand who these people were like. Meager, indeed, and cold was the sympathy that a transgressor might look for from such bystanders at the scaffold. On the other hand, a penalty which in our days would infer a degree of mocking infamy and ridicule might then be invested with almost as stern a dignity as the punishment of death itself. There's a lot of, harsh and severe language here, which is, again, connected to the type of people these people were. Very strict, very severe, very religious, very law-abiding. It was important in their colony to make sure people followed the laws which were tied to the religion. This is, again, the word order is kind of a little weird. The subject of this sentence is the word sympathy. The sympathy was indeed meager and cold. The sympathy of these people towards the person who might be coming out that door. Here's the word transgressor. That means the person who commits the sin or the unlawful criminal act. The transgressor. On the other hand, a penalty which in our days would infer a degree of mocking infamy and ridicule might then be invested with almost as stern a dignity as the punishment of death itself. So basically it's talking about how these people felt about punishment and how serious it was, and no matter what type of punishment it was, they treat it almost as if they were willing to give the punishment of death itself. So as you can see, these people are being very much described as a very stern and serious people. It was a circumstance to be noted on the summer morning when our story begins its course that the women, of whom there were several in the crowd, appeared to take a peculiar interest in whatever penal infliction might be expected to ensue. Long sentence again. The women are taking interest in this. For some reason, they seem to be very interested in what's about to happen. The age had not so much refinement that any sense of impropriety restrained the wearers of petticoat and farthingale from stepping forth into the public ways and wedging their not unsubstantial persons, if occasions were, into the throng nearest to the scaffold at an execution. Okay, basically, again, a long sentence. It's saying that these women were not so prim and proper that they weren't willing to push their way through the crowd, so they could get to the front, so they could see what's going to happen. They weren't that prim and proper. They weren't going to hold back anything. They were going to push their way forward. Let's see, where were we? Morally, as well as materially, there was a coarser fiber in those wives and maidens of old English birth and breeding than in their fair descendants. Separated from them by a series of 6 or 7 generations, for throughout that chain of ancestry, every successive mother has transmitted to her child a fainter bloom, a more delicate and briefer beauty, and a slighter physical frame, if not a character of less force and solidity than her own. This is talking about the women that these women are descendants of. Okay, the women of England were very fragile and fair-skinned, and they, were very quiet, and they were morally and materially humble. And that's a different fiber. That's a coarse. These women that are here in the colony of Boston are of a coarser fiber. Let's see, where were we? If not a character. So the women who were now standing about the prison door stood within less than half a century of the period when the man like Elizabeth had been the not altogether unsuitable representative of the sex. Man like Elizabeth, they're talking about Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of England. You would have to look into history and learn a little bit about her, but she was a very strong character in English history as one of their queens. They were her countrywomen, and the beef and ale of their native land, with a moral diet not a whit more refined, entered largely into their composition. The bright morning sun, therefore, shone on broad shoulders and well-developed busts, and on round and ruddy cheeks that had ripened in the far-off island, and had hardly yet grown paler or thinner in the atmosphere of New England. There was, moreover, a boldness and rotundity of speech among these matrons, as most of them seem to be, that would startle us at the present day, whether in respect to its purport or its volume of tone. So this whole part here is really just describing these women. And since the author is giving a lot of description to these women, that means it's important that you read that. It's important that you understand what these women were like in the colony of Boston, because it's going to, their personalities and their behavior and their demeanor are going to matter in this novel when we learn the characteristics of the protagonist. Okay, we're going to see her soon. She is going to be the person stepping out of that prison door. But it's important that you see what these women of the town are like, what kind of women they are. So make sure you understand what it's saying about them here. Always pay attention when there's a lot of description given to something. The author's not just doing that for fun. It has some sort of relevance to the story. Okay, so very important. Good wives, said a hard-featured dame of 50. A dame is a woman, okay. I'll tell ye a piece of my mind. It would be greatly for the public behoof if we women, being of mature age and church members in good repute, should have the handling of such malefactresses as this Hester Prynne. Highlight that. That is our protagonist that we're going to be reading about. What think ye, gossips? So this old lady of 50 is saying, I think we should be the ones to handle the sentence or the punishment of Hester Prynne. So we have to find out why she thinks that, but this is what she's saying. And then she continues, if the hussy stood up for judgment before us 5 that are now here in a knot together, would she come off with such a sentence as the worshipful magistrates have awarded? Marry, I trow not. Not the language you use today, right? I know. But basically, you can get the idea if you read it in context. The woman is saying that if Hester Prynne had been judged and sentenced and punished by these 5 women, including this lady, this 50-year-old dame who's talking, she would not have gotten off with an easy sentence, the sentence that the magistrates, the judges, have given her. And she says, I believe not. That's kind of what she's saying. Marry, I trow not. I don't think so. That's what she's saying. Today, that's how we would say it. Instead of marry, I trow not, we'd say, I don't think so. And now somebody else is talking because we have a new paragraph here. People say, said another, that the Reverend Master Dimsdale, okay, here's a male character, and I forgot to do exactly what I told you to do. We first heard about Hester Prynne here, so we want to mark her spot here with a pink tab, and we are first hearing about Master Dimsdale, Reverend Master Dimsdale, right here, okay? So you put your character tabs when you hear about them. People say, said another, that Reverend Master Dimsdale, her godly pastor, takes it very grievously to heart that such a scandal should have come upon his congregation. Congregation is a word used to mean the people that are part of a church, all the people that attend and are part of a church. And the pastor is the leader of the church. He's the one that teaches and preaches to his congregation. The magistrates are God-fearing gentlemen, but merciful overmuch. That is a truth, added a third autumnal matron. Autumnal means this person's in their later life. So again, an older lady. At the very least, they should have put the brand of a hot iron on Hester Prynne's forehead. So this person is suggesting what the punishment should have been. At the very least, it should have been this. They should have branded her with a hot iron on her forehead. Madam Hester would have winced at that, I warrant me. But she, the naughty baggage, little will she care what they put on the bodice of her gown. Okay, so we're starting to hear what the punishment's going to be. They are going to put something on the bodice of her gown. The bodice is the top part that goes over the chest. Okay, so that's going to be, they're putting something on her gown. Why, look you, she may cover it with a brooch, or such like heathenish adornment, and so walk the streets as brave as ever. She's saying, what good is it going to do to put something on her gown as a punishment, because she could just cover it with something? Ah, but, interposed more softly, a young wife. Okay, here's a young person finally talking. A young wife, holding a child by the hand. Let her cover the mark as she will. The pang of it, the pain, pang here almost means like a sharp pain. The pain of it will be always in her heart. So this younger wife is arguing with this person and saying, even if she covers up whatever they're putting on her gown, on her dress, she will still feel the pain of it in her heart, because she will know she did wrong. What do we talk of marks and brands, whether on the bodice of her gown or the flesh of her forehead? Cried another female, the ugliest as well as the most pitiless of these self-constituted judges. This woman has brought shame upon us all and ought to die. Is there not law for it? Truly there is, both in the scripture and the statute book. Then let the magistrates who have made it of no effect thank themselves if their own wives and daughters go astray. So this person is saying the penalty or the punishment should be so severe that they should have put her to death. Because by not putting her to death, which the Bible or scripture and the statute book, which is the law books, they both say that that should be the punishment for what this woman has done. That for the crime or the sin that she did, she should be put to death. And both of these books say so. And what did we learn? Remember what we learned right here? That these were the kind of people amongst whom religion and law were almost identical. They were interfused with each other. So we've got religion, scripture, and law right here. And so this woman is saying, you know what? Why are we even talking about marks and brands on her body or her dress? Why are we even talking about that? They should have put her to death. And then this woman says, let the magistrates, the judges, who have made it of no effect, meaning the sin of this woman is not being punished the way it should. And so therefore, they can just thank themselves if their own wives and daughters go astray. Meaning, if the judges' wives and daughters end up doing the same thing that Hester Prynne did, the judges can thank themselves for it because these women didn't see a strong enough punishment. They didn't see the consequences of such an act. Mercy on us, good wife, exclaimed a man. Finally, a man is talking here in the crowd. Is there no virtue in woman save what springs from a wholesome fear of the gallows? Remember, the gallows is where people are hung. So he's saying, can't women just be virtuous or good without having to fear being hung if they're not? Like, he's just saying, can't women just be good for good's sake without having to feel like they have to be good just so they won't hang on the gallows? He wants women to be good for good's sake. He wants that to be their character and not to be their character only out of fear of death. That is the hardest word yet. Hush now, gossips, for the lock is turning in the prison door, and here comes Mistress Prynne herself. All right, this is a long chapter, and I definitely want to get through it. So I'm going to stop this video, and I will finish the chapter on the next video.